So we are going to now move on to the second presentation by Dr. Tom Fullerton, which it's called Retail and Labor Market Chaos Along the Border. Tom Fullerton is an economics professor at the University of Texas at El Paso, where he holds the endowed chair of the study of trade in the Americas. He is also the director of the UT El Paso Border Region Modeling Project. And again, I want to thank him for joining on today with such a short notice. Dr. Fullerton, adelante, por favor.
I'm glad to participate this afternoon, and let's see, I think several of the things I'm going to talk about echo some of the concerns that were raised by Dr. Sanchez just a few minutes ago. Initially, in terms of trying to understand the retail and labor market impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of economists were focused on the supply side or the production side of the ledger. And that's because of what had been observed in prior outbreaks of health scares such as the SARS crisis in 2002 and 2003. And a lot of those involved serious impacts in terms of supply chain disruptions. Here on the border, let's see, some of those have materialized. None of them have materialized to their full extent, but perhaps the one sector that is most vulnerable to these type of supply chain disruptions is automobile manufacturing. There are a lot of automobile parts manufactured, all the way from Tijuana to Matamoros. And let's see, the full extent of what's going to happen in this industry is not understood at this point, but it is going to cause a lot of disruptions. And it's probably going to lead to a lot of workers on the south side of the border in Mexico relocating back into central and southern Mexico because of widespread layoffs that are likely to occur. There is a demand side aspect to that, which is sort of complicating this, and that is every day the estimates of the declines in North American automobile production, which of course includes the south side of the border and all the IMEX factories, from Tijuana to Matamoros. Let's see, those daily estimates keep escalating because, let's see, automobile sales in the United States and Canada are projected to decline. And so just about 5 days ago, it was an estimate of 600,000 reduction in automobile production in North America. Now that's up to 980,000 just 4 days later. And I'm pretty sure that number is going to escalate substantially. Some of the people on the production side of things say, well, it's true, things are going to be very disruptive, but let's see, the year as a whole is a long period of time and there will be some recovery. With that regard, just to chime in on some of the risks that Dr. Sanchez mentioned, I think we should not be lulled into a false sense of security during the summer months when the number of COVID cases is going to decline. We should be mindful of what was observed in 1918 during the Spanish flu epidemic, when, the echo effect occurred, 6 months later, once the new cold season began. And we're going to see more disruptions, not only in the United States, but also on the Mexican side of the border. Now, in terms of the retail market, part of it has already emerged very quickly in cities such as El Paso or McAllen or Brownsville, where self-isolation has been imposed, and there have already been several hundred, if not several thousand, business closures. The big question is, how many of those business closures are going to translate into business bankruptcies? In that regard, at least part of what the federal government response has been is going to mitigate that effect. In other words, in the absence of the federal government's $2.2 trillion program, the number of business bankruptcies would be much higher than it is going to be, but it's still going to be a big number. And we can expect to see a substantial reduction in retail sales. Dr. Sanchez mentioned that the bridges have been, closed to all but essential traffic flows. That means that most of the personal automobile traffic that normally goes en route between, the city pairs along the border, the Texas-Mexico border, most of those personal automobile flows have been halted, which means that retail trade on the north side of the border is being reduced substantially. And again, that contributes to the anticipated increases in business bankruptcies that are going to occur, throughout the course of 2020 and maybe on into 2021. In this regard, there's a lot of economic uncertainty from a business cycle perspective. Initially, when it seemed like most of the impact could be contained to China and then later Western Europe, it was a concern that maybe it would be a so-called V-shaped recovery. In other words, a sharp decline for about 1 or 2 quarters and then a sharp recovery. Now the V-shaped recovery is considered to last for 4 quarters, which is an entire calendar year's worth of recessionary activity. And more economists are starting to believe that it's going to be a U-shaped recovery, which means that the recession will last 8 quarters or 2 entire years. That's a long time for a protracted economic downturn, and it implies that there's going to be more public measures that are going to be taken to try to mitigate the effects of this. But this is something that has a lot of business analysts and policy analysts very concerned. The one thing to keep into account is that when the Spanish flu epidemic occurred in 1918, it was followed very quickly by a period of economic expansion known as the Roaring Twenties. I don't know if we're going to see a reemergence of the Roaring Twenties for this decade, but recoveries from pandemics like this can be very rapid. However, we do face this uncertainty over how long this recession is going to last, and so we're in for a bumpy ride. Fortunately, some of the steps that have been taken are good in terms of, announcements of eviction moratoria for both renters as well as people that owe mortgages on their houses. There's also utility cutoff moratoria in many cities in Texas and the United States, and that will allow people to maintain their electricity, their gas, and their water connections, which helps from the health perspective that Dr. Sanchez was mentioning earlier. And for the border communities on the north side of the border, these of course are communities in Texas that have below average per capita and household earnings. The relief package, as presently constituted, targets the households that make up the majority of these communities. We will get the maximum impact in terms of those checks that are going to arrive from the federal government, and that should help minimize the downside risks of this emerging recession. I'll close, with 3 items. One, the new U.S. unemployment numbers that were released this morning represented the largest monthly increase in unemployment in the United States since the recession of 1975. That's going to be a short-lived record. The April increase in the unemployment rate is going to break that record. It's going to be even larger. I think by June, the U.S. unemployment rate will rise all the way to 16%. And in border communities such as El Paso, it will probably, reach 18%, with possible exception of McAllen. McAllen has potential to go beyond 20% by June. So, that's a very serious, labor market scenario that we're facing. It may turn out to be even optimistic, but that's what we're facing. That's kind of a serious note to close on, so I'll just say one final comment, and that is, quiero agradecer al pistolero tecnológico Augusto Rubi de UT-Arlington por toda la ayuda técnica que nos ha proveído a todos que participamos esta tarde. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fullerton, and yes, I extend also las gracias nuestro técnico gas que está en el background ayudándonos. Thank you for your presentation. If anything, it points out how the dire situation that might weigh economically to the very population that Dr. Sanchez was highlighting before as rather vulnerable. And even though our webinar today is, as I say, we're trying to understand what's going on right now on the ground, I think that your presentation reminds us the long-term effect that we should be looking at and be preparing for. So thank you for bringing those comments.